everybody. We are starting in a few more minutes, so it would be great if you could grab a seat and make yourself comfortable. Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you for taking time to come down this morning. I'm Ziying from SG Innovate, and today we are very happy to collaborate with General Assembly for yet another great event. At SG Innovate, we believe Singapore has the capabilities and resources to tackle hard problems from around the world, and part of our efforts includes knowledge sharing sessions like the one you're here for today. So without further ado, I'll hand over the mic to Gabriela to share more about GA. Gabriela, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us so early morning. We really appreciate it. I work for a company called General Assembly. May I know how many of you have heard about it before? Hands up. How many of you have attended our event before? Thank you for joining us again, and hello, new faces. We are a technology education company. That means we are helping individuals to enter the world of tech, and we are helping corporates to reskill their employees to be future ready. So if you want more information, I will be around probably upstairs after, so find me, and I'm happy to chat more. And thank you, SG Innovate, for hosting us. And now let me introduce Steve. Steve will be leading the panel tonight in the morning. I hope still night. So please enjoy the discussion. Feel free to ask many questions. We have a Slido tool up there, and he will introduce it, and you can ask many questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Gabriela. So I just wanted to say thanks again to General Assembly for hosting this talk, and to SG Innovate for hosting us physically. And thanks to everybody here for coming. I didn't know how the turnout was going to be in the morning, because I usually go to the evening events, and I'm really amazed at how many people got here this morning. So good for you guys. My name is Stephen Tracy, so I'm the CEO at a consumer analytics startup called Milieu Insight, M-I-L-I-E-U. It's a tough one. But we're a 2-year-old analytics firm. And we've got a really exciting panel to kind of drive the discussion today about AI and automation. So I'm going to quickly introduce the panel. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can engage with us throughout the discussion. And then we're going to kick off. But sitting right next to me is Ben Whitman. This is the second time we've shared a panel together. And so Ben is the head of data strategy at a kind of a big company called Dentsu. And so Ben, you can kind of talk a little bit more about what you do as we kick off. Next to Ben is Michael Cutler. He's the chief data officer at KPMG Lighthouse. And we were talking about your focus, ASPAC. What does that mean? Asia Pacific, ASPAC. Oh, okay. Oh, no. I've never heard it with the S before, but that makes sense. Next to Michael is Maida Lim. So Maida is actually passing through, so you're based in China. So it's great to have you with us today. And she's the head of technology at ANZ Bank, based again in China. Where specifically in China are you based? Chentu, okay. And next to her is Chuckling, who is the CEO at IDA Technologies. And we were talking before, and he does some really interesting work in the space of AI implementation. So we've got a really, really distinguished panel today. I'm here as the moderator, so I'm just here to I'm certainly not an expert on AI, but I'm here to learn, and I'm here to kind of poke and prod on the discussion. But there's a couple of different ways you can engage with the panel. So, I'll kind of kick the discussion off, but as we go, I'd really encourage you to send questions in. At one point, probably about the halfway mark, once your caffeine is set in, we'll pass the mic around so you can ask questions if you want. But at any time, if you want to submit questions via Slido, you can do that. So all you have to do is open up your phone or your tablet or your laptop, go to Slido. I think if you just type in Slido or sli.do, you'll go to a website and you can type in a code and type in uppercase K509, and you can type in your questions and I'll be able to see them here. Generally what happens is that there's like no questions in the first 5-10 minutes, and then there's like a bazillion questions after 15 minutes. So if you want your question to be to actually be asked, the earlier you do it, the better. But I won't be able to get to everything, but again, you can submit questions at any time. So without further ado, we are 6 minutes in. So what I want to kind of start with today, and Ben, we can start with you, is actually just to kind of warm everyone up. I think it'd be great if you can each kind of introduce yourselves in about 2.5 minutes. We already know what your roles are and what companies you work with, but just introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about how you kind of interact with AI in a kind of a practical sense in your day-to-day job. So just kind of briefly as an introduction. So Ben.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. So I work for the Dentsu Aegis network within our regional data team, so reporting into a CDO, actually, for the region. And we have our Global Data Innovation Center based in Singapore. It's actually a partnership with the EDB. So we are involved in doing a variety of machine learning and artificial intelligence solutions. Specifically, as you would guess, given it's Dentsu, the marketing conglomerate, focused on automating marketing activities, et cetera. And we're also, interestingly, the largest customer for Google and Facebook within the Asia-Pacific region. So we work with them quite a bit on co-innovation and taking a look at all of the data that they bring into their respective organizations and how we can effectively leverage it to more effectively help our clients engage with their customers at the end of the day. So that's what I spend a good amount of my time doing, as well as data governance. So I think we're going to be talking about ethics later on in the session. So how do you effectively set up a strong foundation for data governance when you're doing something like AI and big data? So that's what I do in my day job.
Thank you. My name is Michael Cutler. My picture is slightly different. Depending on the day of the week, I have two roles. So the role on the board is KPMG Lighthouse. So KPMG Lighthouse was set up as a way of keeping a watching brief on how emerging technologies will impact our clients. So things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, edge computing, all these other types of new emerging technologies, drone technology, and then the far-off stuff like quantum computing. So we have people, experts around the world, who are completely subject matter experts in quantum computing. It's still maybe 10 years out, but when that technology comes to the market, it's going to disrupt everything. Everyone who uses encryption was going to have to change the way they operate because that technology is so disruptive. So that's the function of Lighthouse. The second part, when I'm wearing a t-shirt, it says Digital Village, is basically a startup unit within KPMG where we take emerging technology and we bring it to life. So part of my role looks at the forward-facing stuff, and then the other part is actually turning it into reality. So on any given day of the week, we'll be building artificial intelligence models. Those might help you do dynamic pricing. That might give you a new business model, a new product or service, or enable you to enter low-cost markets. Whether that's implemented as a mobile app or a back-office function, it doesn't really matter. We're helping you deliver that innovation. So on a day-to-day basis, I see my involvement in AI as helping other companies to accelerate or find new business models, business products. And I think that's the really exciting part about artificial intelligence, is it really has sort of leveled the playing field. 20 years ago, you had to be someone like Google with a huge amount of funding to do AI. 10 years ago, with the advent of cloud, you could get basically your own head start on doing AI in the cloud using other people's resources. Now you could actually get pre-trained models and just use them AI as a service, whether that's on Azure or Google. You log in, you give it your credit card number, and you've got a state-of-the-art trained AI that you can use. So I think that's really exciting times. It's part of the reason I moved to Asia, is because this is where the innovation is happening. Thank you.
Hi, very good morning to everyone. Because I moved to Asia, therefore I moved to China. Yeah, Meida Lim, I work for ANZ Bank. Now I'm based in China, Chengdu. Chengdu is a hometown for Panda. So what are we doing in terms of the bank in Chengdu? Chengdu is a 22 million population city. So every year we have about 400,000 university grads in the city, just the city, not even the province. Out of the 400,000, we have about 60,000 pure IT grads. So why the bank are there? Because we are there to tap into the talent. My day job is running a campus. We call that a technology campus, is where we have all the software engineers that we house them together to do software developments and software engineering for the bank. And whatever technologies that we apply, we need talents, we need people. And we need to be at the place where we can get access to the wide range of the talent in order to build the technology come to life. So AI, blockchain, all this is one of the, I would say that is all the selections elements in the campus that we are focusing on. While we are doing a software development, at the same time, my job is to transform the staff or the software engineer to have the AI plus X. If you look after the core banking solution, if you look after the omni-channel for the bank, you can't be just a good enough engineer to do coding, to know the front end, the back end. You need to know the AI. So my day job is very much that how to get these talents ready for the future. And why we are there in China is, I would say, it's a sandbox by itself. It's an open university that you learn all this technology, not because of the school teach you. You learn all this technology because of the day-to-day that they are interacting with in their day-to-day jobs that teach them how to pick up all the skill set. So just now we were talking about facial recognition. Facial recognitions or biometrics is, perhaps myself, I swap my face at least few hundred times a day. For us, it's acceptable to get our face picture taken, and we find that it's convenient. The environment teaches us to adopt the technology, to learn the technology, to make our engineer to be curious. But if I put the same campus in the other context, it may not be the so-called given advantage that we have. So why we're in China? Partly because of the talents. The second reason is because the technology is booming in that part of the world. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chuckling. I'm founder, CEO of IDA Technologies. We are a SG Innovate investee company. So we raised our Series A just in April this year. The lead was MasterCard, and SG Innovate was one of the other investors. We specialize in applying AI and machine learning in the financial vertical, so banks and insurance companies. In this 2.5-year journey, we have now have customers in 7 countries. So customers in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, India, Hong Kong, and now Philippines. We build our capability from our history. I spent 15 years in the Singapore government, 10 years working for a regulator, the IDA. So at that time, I was a CTO at IDA, and we introduced one of the first sandboxes at that time. There was a new technology that came along, and everybody was kind of, do we accept it, do we not accept it? If it comes in, will it cause a problem? So the concept of sandbox was to give it a safe place where you can do experimentation. If something goes wrong, you can shut it down really fast. So back in 2004, there was a place in the science park called the UWB Friendly Zone. So that was something that was created to do the first sandbox. Then from the regulator, I then went to work for A*STAR, which is the research organization in Singapore. I ran I2R, the largest ICT research institute with 600 researchers. And we had a great team of data scientists at that time. So drawing on that experience, we came out and from IDA. We focus on really only 3 areas. First area is how do you use AI to better engage your customers, to know more about your customers, so you can do all kinds of things like upsell, cross-sell, targeted selling, understanding their behavior, whether they're going to churn, whether they're going to be an NPL, a non-performing loan, to know it early enough so you can do something. That's one bubble. The second bubble is about how do you automate internal processes. I think all large organizations got a lot of processes. Like even you want to onboard somebody, you have to capture the information, you have to process the information, you may have to compare with various databases, you have to apply some logic and so on. Can you automate that part of thing? So bring it from days down to seconds, right? The onboarding process, the automation onboarding process is the second part. And the third part is equally important. The third part is about risk and compliance. So many large organizations have risk and compliance obligations, and then can use AI to kind of be like what I call a guardian angel that looks at what's going on, alert you when something's wrong, right? So 3. The first one, we say revenue is for the CEO. The second one is about efficiency and operational excellence, is for the COO. And the third one actually is for the board, because you feel a compliance issue is an issue that board has to handle.
Great, thanks everyone. And congrats on the Series A raise, Chuck. I'm a victim of my own success, so I usually don't see this many questions this early in the panel, and now I have 1,000 questions. But there's a common theme around a couple of them, which is kind of practical approaches to implementation and kind of getting started. And that's a place I want to kind of start with first. So Michael, maybe I'll throw the first question to you. But before we even get to implementation, AI is such a broad space, and there are so many applications. And in a way, AI is kind of a canvas. Like you can use it creatively to solve problems you didn't even know that you had, or problems that you do know that you have. So how do you help clients or customers or businesses figure out which problems they should be solving with AI? Are there frameworks or strategies you can use to help them kind of figure out what's the best kind of application they use before they even get into an implementation?
Sure. So I'll talk to my own experience, but I've worked in startups, government, consulting, all sorts. There's a common theme, which is when you meet somebody or you talk to a CEO at a medium-sized business, they will say, I want to do AI. What do I need to do to get started? And you say, well, to your point, which direction do you want to go? Like, AI can do almost anything. So let's start looking at your data. So where's your data? And he goes, oh, here it is. It's on paper, or it's on a spreadsheet. And it's a couple of rows. There's a massive gap in expectations. Obviously, he's just read The Economist. He's seen some other companies doing an amazing thing. But behind the scenes, he doesn't realize that there's millions of data points. There's the data processing, the data analysts, the data engineers who clean up all the dirty data, aggregate it into the one place. Then a team of data scientists who trained the AI model, went through a whole series of error testing, testing out different algorithms. Then the finished model is a thing that you see in The Economist. It's not something that you can start overnight. I did mention earlier about this AI as a service, which is the newer trend, is you can get these pre-trained models. And that's going to be quite interesting for the smaller businesses because they could start with PDF scans of their documents. They can submit that to an AI sort of as a service on Azure Cloud. That trained model has been trained with millions of examples of data, and it can come back and say, this looks like an invoice written in Mandarin, it says this, and it has this amount. That's a step change in where businesses can start. To my point earlier about the 20 years ago, it was only the preserve of Google. 10 years ago, cloud services made that easier. Now you can basically get this on demand. You still need to provide high quality data. So that's where your data quality, your data governance comes in. But once you have that, you can start quite inexpensively, like with a credit card on your Azure account, you can try state-of-the-art models and then test that out for your business.
Anyone want to add to that? Chuck?
So what you mentioned is perfectly correct. So if you want to do AI, first question is, do you have the data, right? All the AI systems will need to work on data. It needs to use your existing data because the AI engine, when it starts up, doesn't know anything. It's just an engine. It needs your data to learn what is your processes, what's your history, and how do you treat something. So let's say if you do not have data to start with, is a non-starter, right? So first, do you have data? Then the second thing is, do you have data in a form that AI can consume? If your data is kind of sitting on pieces of paper, or your data is in handwriting, oh boy, then it's a much harder battle, right? How do you get this data into electronic form? So for those people who already gone down the digitization process, your data is already digital form. Boy, you already have a head start. So when we started our company, one of the biggest challenges was how to get the data into the system. So we need to have what's called a data capture system. And that wasn't very high tech, but turns out to be something that we were able to sell a lot again and again and again, because getting data into the system was a challenge. Yeah.
I would like to share a case study or a real case. So we have an engineer that normally we do say 20% innovation playtime for them. So we have a PhD in mathematics. So they came up with a group, they do algorithm style of study, tapping into the colleagues that he is a PhD, right? So AI is a journey, or I would say that AI is a destination that you never know where is the journey point or the starting, like the implementation. So the group started as an interest group, just focused on algorithms. And they use the algorithms, they came up with a scanning mechanism, where it's like everything now we scan and capture, where it's like now this is more on the structural data, when the data that we define on what's the format that we want. Visa introduced a new credit card model, the new format. From a 16 string, they put it into block of 4 digits in one block. So there is a new Visa credit card number. And every banking apps or whatever apps that you need payment, you need to scan your credit card. And at that point of time, this particular story was, it's supposed to be the story develops in our Melbourne campus. They worked on that for months, and after that, they knew we have this 20% innovation time. They flipped the story over. They said, can you all look into it during your free times? So we have one engineer working on the scanning, but they don't have a problem statement that they work on, and they have the algorithms. So the story flipped over 5 days. They came up with this cut IO scanning mechanisms that can scan the new Visa format. And yes, we solved one of the problems for the business, but they took it to the next level. We need to scan a fake card. There is a lot of fake card in the market. One you scan, you will never know until you test it through the payment system. So they use the scanning algorithms, they further improve it and start scanning. The moment they scan, they know this is a real card, this is a fake card. Immediately you reject it. And if we reduce the so-called overhead in the operation, we reduce a lot of overhead within the so-called the COO function that taking up a lot of the cost on that. We started that without knowing what problem we're going to solve. And we do not know what journey that we're going to take. But apparently when all the pieces that come together, it fit well for a bank, for us to solve our problems. So my sharing here is more about curiosity. That yes, we have a best-in-class technology, but we need to have a best-in-class curiosities that what are the journey that we wanted to start, what we want to embark. Not waiting for that, this is a perfect problem statement, this is a problem, say, solution architect document, therefore then we start. I think in the today world, in the fast-moving world, there is no such thing about wait and see. Perhaps just jump in and see how deep is the water.
So I think that's really interesting, because you're kind of saying that in some ways, I thought you were going to go a different direction with that. It's like sometimes starting without the problem statement is kind of not a good way to go. You're kind of moving without a compass. But in some ways, taking an approach where you do kind of like a hackathon, where you just kind of get the right people in a room together and creatively come up with different use cases or applications, has actually been a really good approach, as opposed to the traditional way of like coming up with complex like service level requirements documentation. And so, Ben, maybe you can add to that if you want, but do you find that's something that you've also seen as well, and do you think that's a good starting point for every kind of business as an early kind of way to get into AI applications? Does that approach lend itself to what you've seen as well?
Yeah, so we actually, as an organization, did the first joint hackathon that Google had ever had within the Asia Pacific region, specifically for a marketing consultancy. So we brought in, they call them G-Tech. They're experts in, actually, they're expert in the region in terms of machine learning and artificial intelligence, came in to help us look at how we could co-innovate. I think, riffing off of, to answer the earlier question, riffing off what Michael said, I think to try and be a pragmatist, my recommendation would be, yes, you need to start with what is the definition of AI to your organization, right? I think it reminds, I'm old enough and was based in Silicon Valley prior, all the hype around cloud, right? So you have to be on the cloud, you have to be on the cloud. I mean, you have all the hype cycles for all the different technology, and I would say that AI is right now kind of at the peak of the Gartner hype cycle. And so you get a lot of organizations that are going into AI because they've heard that they should go into AI, but without really starting at that fundamental level, getting the right people in the room and deciding what the business problem is. So I found the title of this presentation, or this panel, interesting because it makes a point of saying artificial intelligence and automation. And fundamentally, my advice to everyone would be that automation may be a pretty smart place to start, because you do have that AI as a service capability. And there's no point in you undertaking, especially if you're a smaller organization, some advanced big data, big technology implementation to try and get into AI. At a fundamental level, when really you could look at, which most organizations look at first, how can I automate things in the organization to more effectively either serve customers, reduce risk, et cetera. So I was speaking with I think he calls himself the Chief Customer Officer of AirAsia, and they're getting rid of all of their call centers. In my opinion, as a customer, a pretty big move, especially for an airline, but increasingly airlines are looking to do that. And how are they doing that? Well, they're looking to employ things like the chatbots and voice AI type of technology to be able to, in theory, provide better customer value. And the side benefit, just like environmentalism in the hotels, don't wash your sheets, is it'll cut cost out of the organization as well, right? So my recommendation would be start with automation, start very fundamentally, co-innovate, as you heard Maida say.
Great. Please, yeah.
The question was, if you are a company, where do you start, right? And we then talk about AI as a technology and whether you have data or not. I think if you're a company and you want to use AI, you can start first by saying you have to believe that AI works. AI can work, because there's enough examples already, right? 5 years ago, maybe, but now there are actually enough examples where AI has worked in multiple verticals. So you start with the concept that if you find the right person to work with, it will work. Then the next question really is, where will AI create the greatest impact? Because AI can be applied to HR, can be applied to sales, can be applied to so many places, right? You ask yourself, for your organization, where do you want the greatest impact, right? Then, once I understand where you have the greatest impact, then say whether do you have the infrastructure, do you have the data to support it, right? So come down like that rather than bottom up. Because if you do it wrong, you can apply AI and it works, but the impact is small. So we have many examples whereby we have started a project, and then the customer comes along and says, wow, like that, I actually want you to work on a different area where it's an even bigger pain point for me, right? So I solved this problem, but because they didn't have sufficient faith that it could work, you try a small problem, right? Then later on try, oh, I want you to do something else. Start with the biggest pain point you have, and then see whether it could support it. Yeah.
So then my follow-up question to that would be, how do you help them with measurement of the impact of AI? And obviously, that I imagine there's probably a near-term and a long-term answer to that, but how do you help them know that it's having an impact?
Okay, measurement to me is actually quite easy. Because AI does not try and invent something new, okay? AI, no, it's not new. What is saying, the three bubbles that I talk about, customer acquisition, how do you target? The second area, how do you automate? The third area, how do you manage risk? Each one of these are very measurable. You have your existing business as usual. So customer acquisition, say, yeah, I have a sales force of, say, 100 people. How many people can they reach? What's their hit rate? That means every month, how many they can bring in. Now, if I use AI, and because of the AI, I can now target the person better. I know where to find. So it's very measurable. Now, in terms of the automation part, you have a certain internal processes that you run. Let's say you have a team of 50 people. They can process 1,000 throughput in a month. With AI, you challenge the AI to say, can I now do that with much less people or much shorter time? Same thing for risk, right? I think it's very measurable.
Great.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so we are all familiar about China. They have 2 digital banks. In fact, China have 3 digital banks. There is another digital bank. It's called Xinguang Bank, XW Bank. It is probably, I think, the 18 months, 19 months years old bank, and they have about 22 million customers. Customer acquisition is 1 million per month. And so if you want to measure customer acquisition, what? Yes, and how they acquire customer is, in the 6 seconds before they disperse a loan, within the 6 seconds, they run 16 modeling of the customer that do you want to acquire this customer. So yes, we heard about the V Bank, the N Financial, but this is another bank that the regulator allowed to be created within China, where they are not part of any of the ecosystem. The purpose of this bank is, Ali have their own ecosystem, Tencent have their ecosystem, but how about the people like you and me that not using, that not part of their ecosystem? So this bank was created to fit that particular purpose for financial inclusion. So 1 million, 1 month. And the staff that they are running, the IT staff that they're running, they are not increasing their IT staff at all. So what is the measurement? I think that is a very significant measurement.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with. They're like the Alibaba Singles Day of banks. But on that, so what was the name of that bank again?
Xinguang, XW.
Xinguang. Okay.
Yeah.
And so just on them, out of curiosity, is the idea that they're just being able to do the kind of general steps that traditional banks go through to vet their customers faster, or are they kind of playing outside of the traditional regulatory framework for doing things like risk assessment and giving loans and things like that?
Okay, they are a fully banked, which means that a bank that with a banking license. So they are also regulated. When they first started the bank, they said that the first elements that they put together is they developed their fraud detection system. So that is the first engine that they put in before they put themselves up, before they run into a so-called get out to get more business. 6 months, they built the entire so-called the core infrastructure within the bank. And they're part of the entire, I would say, the ecosystem with the traditional bank. Because the traditional banks, they host all the so-called capital. And traditional bank cannot release out the money, the lending. And as a result, that this particular bank, they become a front layer that they are using everything, using all the emerging technology, the latest technology, all the AIs, things like that. So as a result, they take the loans from the bank and then they release out the lendings to so-called those that normally not part of the credit system within the banking industry. So that solved the other problems for the financial inclusions, and from a farmer point of view, it's a very significant uplift for them to elevate their business, to do more business. So banks like that, they make significant impact, but they are not coming into the market to tell the traditional bank, I'm here to disrupt you. But they're just coming into the industry to say that, I'm here to help you to release your fund, to make more money for your money.
Whether they're saying that or not, I think the results are saying that anyways. 1 million new customers in a month, but yeah. Thank you.
So I think one thing that I wanted to add, and I don't know whether we want to deviate down that train of thought at the moment or not, but it does make me think as an American of something that they've run into in the US, where there is regulation that they should not be discriminatory, the banks within the United States, in who they give loans to, right? But the big data was telling banks within the United States that statistically, African Americans defaulted on their loans more. because of socioeconomic reasons within the United States. And so you had AI making decisions about who to issue loans to, but in that process, they were violating government regulations on discriminatory lending. So I think there's always going to be a balance between efficiency, basing things on data, and what that AI and that data is telling you and enables you to do. A very fine line that, when you were signing up that many customers, you need to be very conscious of, especially in a heavily regulated industry.
So this seems like the perfect time to kind of go down the ethics path, because what you're talking about, especially there is a scenario where an engine could assess risk and give out mortgages or loans and account for socioeconomic situations and things like that. But it really comes down to the business rules that are designed in the system, and also the bias or the kind of the thinking of the people who design the systems. And so I've been not doing a good job on keeping the audience engaged, but there is a lot of questions around ethics here, and it says, since AI is not a moral agent itself, who should be responsible for its decisions? And so, we talked a little bit earlier about implementation, and obviously there's a huge part of discovery and setting up the business rules that assess risk or assess who gets loans or whatever. But how does an organization continue to keep a finger on that after the companies that helped implement this are long gone? Who are the people that help do it, and what are the processes that you can have in place to ensure that you're continuously reviewing the ethical kind of execution of the AI in your company?
I think it's a good question. It makes me think again of another anecdote, which was the very famous chatbot that I think it was powered by Deep Blue, right? Oh, yeah, correct. Microsoft, yeah, the Microsoft one. And I mean, we're all, because. And fundamentally, the chatbot learned to be racist, right? Right. So, and why did it learn to be racist? Because it was learning from the people that were interacting with it that in actual fact tended to skew to be racist, right?
Because of Twitter.
Yeah. So, so I think what that indicates is that clearly there does need to be that governance in place, and that governance fundamentally needs to come from those that are developing it, those that are applying it and using it at the end of the day.
Chuckling.
Can I make a comment? I think this issue about ethics, fairness in AI is really a lot of discussion out in the community and so on. So I think we have to be very careful. I think as a principle, to be fair, to be ethical, is the right thing to do. Everybody should do that. But don't go overboard, right? Just like the whole idea of a new technology comes along, if you put too many boundaries, too many barriers, then it will not evolve, right? So many technologies, you have to give it space for it to grow. That's not the same to say let it be bad, okay? But over-constraining it will cause a problem, right? So the MAS has introduced a set of guidelines. This guideline is called FEAT. You can find it on their website. It stands for Fairness, Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency. And essentially, that guideline is written by a group of about 10 very well-established, very highly respected people in Singapore, from the banks, from the regulator, from insurance company, and so on. Their names are given. And essentially, what they want to do is establish these 4 principles and then give companies a guideline on how to deploy it. So the question I ask is this: to what extent is AI used in your system? To what extent? And how is it being used? For example, one extreme is it does everything, You throw some input in, it tells you the answer. Nobody knows what's going on and does everything. That's one super extreme. The other extreme is it's being used to give advice. Just like Google, you key in something into Google search box, it will give you a list of maybe it's a million and give you the top 10, right? Unless you say, I feel lucky, you give you 1. Right? So there's one extreme where it actually does everything and everything completely, and you don't even know it's automated 100%. The other one is actually it gives you advice. Then the next question is, to what extent is it used within your whole operations? If it's used for every single thing you do, or is it just used for something that you do, right? So the something that you do, when it makes a mistake, who carries the cost? That's extremely important consideration. AI is not perfect, right? It will make, just like human beings will also make mistakes. Human beings also make, so AI will also make a mistake. In the rare case when it makes a mistake, how is the mistake? What's the cost? Who carries the cost? We as the designer of system can design such that when the AI makes a mistake, the cost is carried by the organization and not carried by the customer. It's a business decision you do. So in the MAS guideline, essentially it makes it very clear that the company deploying it, whether it is developed in-house or whether it's developed outsourced, the buck stops with them. They need to know, and they use this guideline to guide them on the extent in which you do. So don't go overboard, right? Because you can go overboard. You go on this direction if it's used automatically 100% for single everything. But it's only used for this little component out of everything, and a human able to stop it, then actually it's a different degree. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Did you want to, I saw you pick up the mic. Did you want to add to it? If not,
I'm just going to summarize quickly.
Go for it.
There's two key points here. There's the ethics, and then there's the liability. And within the ethics, there's also the bias. There was a paper recently showing that there's an awful lot of Caucasian bias in machine learning models, particularly around recognizing faces. And the paper went on to detail that if you give this model the faces of Caucasian people, it is very, very good at saying, yes, this is a person, male, female, etc. But then if you start to give it images of people from other ethnic backgrounds, other skin colors, it's far less accurate, is a polite way of saying it. So what happens, I mean, that's quite an interesting novelty, and there's lots of research papers about why that happens. And what happens next is if you take that model, that machine learning model that's been trained and has a white bias that you may not be aware about, and maybe you put that into an autonomous vehicle. And that autonomous vehicle is using that model to drive around the streets and see if it detects a person, it will stop and it will avoid the collision. But if the model has this bias in it and you're not aware of it, and it decides to run over a person of different skin color because it doesn't think that person is there, who is liable for that? So it kind of, where does the buck stop? And it, I think, in my opinion, stops with the company that's implemented that device. Do we have any more audience questions?
We have many. Well, again, let me just get back in on this just before we potentially change the direction, and I promise I'll give you guys mics. But so I was on another panel probably about 2 months ago with Accenture's global AI ethics lead. And so she's been hired in. She works with a team of lawyers, and her entire remit is just dealing with the ethical aspect of AI implementation. And she's coined this term, she's a PhD, she's coined this term called ethical debt. And so it plays from the idea of technical debt, whereas if you don't do it right in the beginning, you create this debt that you have to address at some point. The longer you go, the bigger the problem becomes. And so I guess the question, and as a potential kind of real world application, the idea of designing bias into real world things, the example I always remember is one that I was taught in university was there's this American civil engineer named Robert Moses who is nefarious for building bridges in New York on the way out to Long Island that he actually built low enough so that buses could not get out to Long Island. And the idea was that he wanted to design it so that the lower classes could not get out to these areas to enjoy. So if you look at Robert Moses, there's a lot of interesting stuff. So it's an whether you agree with it or not, it's an interesting example of designing potential bias into a system. And so I guess the follow-up question, and maybe you might want to take this one, is do you think, do you agree with the idea of ethical debt? And do you think that is it important to really get this right from the beginning, or can you just kind of iterate as you go and kind of address the issue of ethics in the long term rather than putting way too much time in the beginning of your implementation? It's a big question. You can answer another one if you want.
It's a very difficult question. It's the same things that I've been like every time when the staff came up with a great idea, I will always ask, do you need a permission for innovation? No, you don't need permission for innovation. So if we need permission for every innovation, we will not have AI today. We will not have, say, an iPhone today. Because of the birth of the iPhone, Therefore, we have a lot of the new movement of all this emerging technology. So would there be an ethic? I would say that it is more on we are all human beings. Every human being will demand minimum at least a respect, which is, I think, is ethical for us to do that. And it's an ethic value system that every human beings that carry, regardless where we are come from, right? So one part of the answer to that, yes. But the second part of the answer to it is, do we need to check every checkbox before we proceed? Perhaps not. You may not need a permission for innovation. If you want innovation, I would say that you just need to innovate in the areas where it's like, what is a benefit for mankind? If we do something good for the mankind, then it may not be the wrong answer as a no. I hope I answer.
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, so again, that comment makes me think of what probably many of you in the audience, since you're here, have heard. Elon Musk has gone out to say that AI can be compared to unleashing a demon. And you talk about ethics and personification and heuristics and is AI going to take over the world and render us all obsolete at the end of the day, like the Matrix or Ex Machina or something like that? I think ethics is indeed a big question. And if AI is being implemented to automate and costing humans their jobs, is that an ethical application of AI? I think we're here within SG Innovate, and the Singapore government's perspective is that we have to stay on top of innovation. Fundamentally, if we don't innovate and don't stay ahead of things like AI, a country like Singapore will be inefficient. So I think the impetus very much depends on the societal framework and the people that are deciding what is ethical and what's not from an AI standpoint.
I think to that point, I think it's up to us. It's up to us as the practitioners. It's up to the data engineers and the data scientists to steer that. I don't think non-technical regulators and government officials can sit in a room and determine what is good and bad AI. There's a recent story about the Google engineers, thousands of them, who signed up a petition against their employer saying, we do not want our AI models to be used to kill people by the Ministry of their defense organizations. So I think it's going to be a grassroots thing. It's going to be the people who understand and build and engineer these systems are going to be the best people to shape its ethics. Right now, if you want to become a lawyer or accountant or any of these other professions, you sign up to a code of ethics. You sign up to a standards body. If you're naughty, they can strike you off the standards body. We don't have that for AI or data or analytics right now. And I think it's something that we, as the practitioners in this field, should aim for to set up.
Right. Yeah. 60 seconds, and then I have to go to the audience.
Okay. so it's super important because the question of is AI ethical always comes up. So I want people to know the difference between AI, the technology, and the implementation of AI, right? AI, the technology, do not know anything about ethics.
It's just an instrument.
Yeah, it's just a tool. It's just a tool. And now, it learns from the data that comes in. So if you feed it data that have bias already built in, it will mirror that bias, and the output will be biased, right? So please don't say AI is unethical. It's actually the implementation that makes it ethical or not ethical, right? So that's one way to do it. That's one way to solve this problem. You can, oftentimes the AI is applied to existing systems. It's learning from existing systems. You can look at the statistics of input data. You can look at the statistics of output data and look at the distribution. This is how you are running now. After you implement your AI, you can run the same statistical analysis of input and output, and then look at the difference. If they are different, if they are same, you're essentially mirroring what the system does. So you cannot blame the AI.
Okay. So interesting, very interesting concept. So the idea of ethics and AI implementation having kind of morally corrupt ethics can be measured, and it'll be present in the data. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to go to the audience. We'll go to the gentleman at the back, and then this gentleman here. Do you have a mic? Somebody want to give him a mic? Just scream.
Yeah. So, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time early in the morning for this session.
Thanks for coming.
My name is Alan, I'm the lead product manager at Grab. And so I would argue, as with Michael, that engineering and product are really the guys that really so on. Basically, they created a very, very expensive machine that tells apart light picture versus dark pictures. And so the question is, what are the other practical examples from your experience of this kind of mistakes, and how can you early on correct for those kind of mistakes? So in a sense, a little bit more, we talked a lot about strategy and ethics, a little bit more down to the ground of day-to-day advice so that we don't fall into these traps later on. Thanks.
Go ahead.
I mean, just a quick one, but I'll defer to my fellow panelists. I think, what we're hearing about testing. So fundamentally, when you're in that sandbox before you deploy it into an active front line or something like that, you need to test it. You need to ask those hard questions. You need to bring in outside expertise to really validate whether what this AI is doing is effective or not, and again ethical. So I say, fundamentally due diligence, getting people outside of perhaps a racially or a sexual group or whatever to give the outside input is essential to that being done effectively.
Anyone else? So I guess the idea is like, how do you, once you've started implementing, how do you ensure that you're failing fast and identifying, the implementation essentially not working correctly, so you can continue to improve?
Right. All my customers are super cautious. So nothing goes live without first doing what's called backtesting. So the backtesting means testing with data they already know the answer, so they can validate that you are doing okay. Then none of them actually go live. Even after that, they will run in parallel for a duration of time, so you can see the comparison to make sure it's still running well. The question that was brought up just now was an issue about failure in input, right? So you expect certain input, and then maybe under certain conditions, bad lighting or whatever, what has come in is what's called misform or jumble up data. The AI is a stupid guy, okay? Whatever garbage in, he thinks, and then you give you garbage out. So a simple solution is to do some sort of check to make sure that the integrity of the data coming in is still within a certain expected boundaries, right?
Can I also ask, who are the kind of people that you want to involve in that process? I know that it's a big space and you'll have all kinds of different people involved in the setup, but when it comes to that kind of back testing and ensuring it's working, is it just purely the devs, or are you involving?
No, the business user is usually, the business owner is the one that has the greatest interest to make sure that nothing goes wrong. So the business owner is the owner of this whole process. And it's for the business owner to push everybody to make sure that you test not just that you're working under normal, but working under the extreme unknown conditions. It's not say working, there's a boundary, a guardrails to make sure that, hey, hang on, this is not what the expected input, take it out.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, just to follow up on that, I think there's two people that need to be in the room. Obviously, you've got your data scientist, your PhD, your rocket scientist, an incredibly smart person who can apply the tools of artificial intelligence to a whole range of problems. But they're not normally the best people to step back and say, is this the challenge that I want to solve? So I think you always need the SME or the business owner to actually see what's going into the machine. One of the ways I describe it is, if AI and machine learning is the dessert, then data quality, data management is the vegetables. You have to eat the vegetables to get to the dessert. It sounds silly, but
you win for the best metaphor I've heard in a while.
Sorry.
Great, thanks. This gentleman here. Yeah.
I don't think I need the microphone. Actually, the question is based on what you just mentioned. I wanted to ask, what do you think about more multidisciplinary things? Because we're thinking about business owners, PhDs in computer science. No one is talking about ethics. No one is talking about social impact. I feel that what happened with social media now is an experiment of how things can go wrong. We could go back and have more people with different backgrounds seeing at these proposals, seeing at these businesses, this legislation, making it better. We can do that now with AI. I think that I was writing my question and I wrote writers, philosophers, socialists, people in medical science. Have you guys have these discussions about how can we put people who don't even care about people who are not tech people? I feel that nowadays the tech people are all in the world, and we forget that there are billions of professionals out there with different backgrounds who don't rely on the computer to do their jobs, but eventually are going to be affected by this AI. We can have different professionals. Even, I mean, technically speaking,
A very good question. And I, as somebody that has children, which it sounds like you've been forcing yours to eat vegetables as well, I think it's one of the interesting things was I was trying to find out and asked a variety of different people, including the PhDs and the data scientists and creatives, actually, because I come from a marketing agency. What jobs do you think actually will not be replaced by AI? Because now you have, I forget how many millions of dollars that AI-created painting sold for, I think this year. So, you know, what would you suggest that somebody that's young, that's going to be alive when, you know, the the drones are taking over, what should they do? And one of the respondents, and it may have been somebody from Google, who said philosopher. Or ethicist, because fundamentally your machines are never going to be, we think, definitely not in my lifetime or likely my kid's lifetime, able to provide that type of unique human value. And so I think, to that end, I totally agree with you. I think you should have those type of people in the room checking what the data scientists are doing. It'll be very important and a unique value add that only humans are going to add into that process moving forward.
There is one of the very famous the chess competitions, the Go games, when the AI won the games. There's no excitement at the AI, the machines. But the human, that gentleman that he lost the game, he cried and he broke down. And everyone in the audience clapped for him. So yes, that is the human versus AI competitions. But what has manifested is the emotional parts where even AI overtake the world, that there's no emotional of the excitements. But when human, there is a human element in that. Yeah. So there is no right or wrong answer or the immediate answer for that. But perhaps the emotional part is something which is that you always stay with the human. So I also wanted to address the first questions that, for example, let's say that where will be the right way or what will be the groups that will get impact. The innovation in China, which is, to me, it is very overwhelming. First, when I first learned about it, any new idea, they will test it with 3 months with 1.4 billion populations. So if let's say that we work in the same company, let's say I have a great AI ideas, if you do the online shoppings, the apps using either one of the e-commerce, the China e-commerce platform, you scan it immediately, they'll tell you what is this and where can you buy, how much is it, how many people buying it, what's the comment of people, whether they like the product or not. So they use that in terms of a convenience for the consumer. But any of all these new innovations that if we work in the same company, I have 3 months to work on the new idea, you have 3 months. After 3 months, you test it with the customer. Whoever have the highest acquisitions of the usage by customer, then your product get into the so-called the motherships to get into the main engine. Then therefore, they will take your product to the next level. There is one startup company, Camera 360, 800 million customers. Today, they are still a startup company doing photo taking. So it's like, it's how is it? I would say that it is about the courage to put the new idea, the innovation, to test it with the real customer. And the real customer will really refine your product for you. Do they like it? Do they not like it? Or what the thing that they like it? I think that it is a two-way feedback rather than some, yes, we need a so-called the brainy master SME in the room. But if we are able to cross over to the bigger rooms, that will give a different idea as well.
Just one of my favorite companies right now is actually from China. It's DJI, and as on a side note, they've just released a product. They specialize in drones. They've released a new remote control car robot called the RoboMaster, which is very cool. You should check it out. I'm definitely buying one. But they
just don't fly out of Changi while they're flying.
yeah. But there's a component, like it's very cool and everything, but there's a learning component where in a very visual, in a coding, but also in a visual drag and drop way, they're teaching kids how to build the robot, but also how to code it to learn how to drive around things. And I think it's incredible now that we're actually at the stage already where we're already able to kind of put products in the market and teach children how to design AIs, and who knows where we'll be in 15, 20 years. Well, I think we've got time for one question. I'm under immense pressure from General Assembly to get you all out by the end of the hour. But I saw a question at the back from someone. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Great question, and we maybe should have started there, but let's end with that. So why don't each of you go through and kind of very quickly define what, a practical definition of AI, and if you want to add on kind of like your closing statements, in 60 seconds or less. And Ben, we'll start with you.
Well, I think fundamentally, one of the things I was educated on within the past year was the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence. So machine learning is essentially you have to train something. So very similar to the human brain to a certain degree, in the sense that your brain is made up on trained neurons, right? So the neurons that fire together stay together, essentially. So it's all based on learning. AI is fundamentally, the definition is, does it pass the Turing test? Does it pass the newer versions of that? And is it sentient? So is it aware of itself, and is it fundamentally learning? So I think we're getting closer to that. I think that's what really has a lot of people freaked out, is once something that has access to big data can start learning itself, then is it going to be, if any of you were old enough to remember the 2001 Space Odyssey, how the heuristic algorithm computer, the red light, when AI's ambitions, which would be theoretically for survival, contradict our best interest as humans, that's really when the big question is going to be raised, and you'll need those philosophers and ethicists in the room for sure, ideally before then.
Thank you. I guess where I see artificial intelligence is there's effectively two axes. So on one axis, you've got the different fields. So within artificial intelligence, as the grand subject, you've got things like natural language processing, the ability to understand languages and translate them, or to interpret or extract information. So a nice anecdote for this is that Google Translate used to have a language-to-language, one-to-one translation model. So you would give it English and say, I want Mandarin, and it has a model that's been trained on English to Mandarin only. Then a couple of years ago, the Google Translate team published a paper saying they used all of this new emerging deep learning, one of the fields of artificial intelligence, and neural networks, etc. And they basically gave this deep learning algorithm all of the different language models and say, figure it out. The objective was they want one model that can translate between any language pair. When they actually looked at this machine and the model that it had trained, the neural network had basically invented a brand new language. So rather than just doing language-to-language mapping, like a one-to-one mapping, the artificial intelligence, the model, had created an intermediate language that it used to translate from any other language. So is this a sort of sign of consciousness? Is this a sign that this artificial intelligence has creativity? I'm sure creating a new language is the same as creating a work of art or creating a poem. I think it's going to be a philosophical question about what we deem creativity and consciousness. So I think that's one area. I think the other axis, it goes into the sort of dystopian future. Right now, we've got what are called artificial narrow intelligence, or narrow artificial intelligence. These are AIs that are trained to do exactly one thing really, really well, better than most humans can. So AlphaGo, produced by DeepMind, That is great at playing Go against the Korean championship, and it won. It is useless at anything else. You can't talk to it and say, Alexa, switch on the lights, because it's not been trained to do that. It's a very, very narrow focus of that one AI. The interesting thing about DeepMind is they then took that approach and used what's called transfer learning, another sort of subfield of artificial intelligence. What can they take from that highly trained specialized model and then generalize to other games? I believe they trained it on 30 different Atari games, and it now is, again, it's still quite narrow on gaming, unless you've got an Atari, or remember an Atari or old enough to, then you can see where that is. I guess the next epoch in the sort of next 5 to 10 years is what's called artificial general intelligence. This is an AI that can generalize to solve many different types or classes of problems. It's quite difficult to conceive how we will interact with those because we don't have a real example to date. There's an awful lot of research. There's like 100 research papers being published a day in this field. So that's, I guess, the near term, 5 to 10 years. Then in the sort of Elon Musk dystopian future, sort of 20 plus years out, is what's called the artificial superintelligence. It's affectionately known as the last invention the human race will ever make. Because once we've created this artificial superintelligence, then we won't have to do anything ourselves. It should create or invent everything else from that point onwards. And it goes back to the 2001 Space Odyssey. What happens in 20 plus years' time when this artificial superintelligence is basically given the challenge saying, it's now the year 2050, climate change is going to kill all of the humans, please help us and reverse climate change. AI computes for a few seconds and says, easy, kill all the humans. So I think this is where, I guess my closing remark would be, at the moment, keeping humans in the loop is probably crucial to our future survival.
AI is created by human being anyway, right? So it's always a 1 + 1 greater than 2. AI could be one component, but you need to plus another one to get the greater than 2. Electricity invented for one time. We no need to reinvent the electricity again, but we invent different type of the light bulb that to use the power. So it's greater than 2. Like paper money, invented 2,000 years ago. Paper money is not invented because of we need a paper money. There is a two technology that available at 1,000 years ago. There is paper and printing. So we have to always think about AI plus the other one to get the greater than 2. And so I would like to close with this particular sharing. That 2 days ago, there was an earthquake that struck in Sichuan. And normally, earthquake, we will detect that the earthquake strike and what is the magnitude of the impact. But they bring what had happened on that night itself at 11:30 is 62 seconds before the earthquake, they make a citywide announcement that earthquake is going to strike and please run to your nearest rescue for shelter. That happened at the entire province-wide in Sichuan. So is it not because of the AI? Yes, they have used the data, they interpreted, analyzed into the data, but they make an announcement to save life. And today, the so-called total death not even hit anything at the 50 mark. I think if I'm not mistaken, the last number I saw is about 13, but I haven't checked the number yet. The 62 second in at once announcing, asking everyone to run for shelter, that make a difference. If it's not because of this, I think the damage could be higher. So always keep the human in mind in the way that any AI that we created or we use or we apply for, it always needs a human element in that. Yeah.
Thanks. Chuckling, closing remarks.
Just a very fast one. You look at how a child learns, right? A child learns by observation. This is a cup, this table, this is your dad, your mom. It's just from observation, and nobody tells it any rules. If you look at how computer programming, IT is developed historically, for a long time, you have to tell it rules. Like this is a cup, it's circle, it contains water, it can do this. So you have to write rules. So that was one path a lot of people went on until this field comes along, whereby actually you don't write any rules, you just give it examples. And so able to learn from the examples and generalize. So I think you asked about AI. AI is ability to learn and update itself over time and get better and better.
Thank you so much. So we're at the top of the hour. I think some of us are going to stick around. So if you don't have to run off to work, you're more than welcome to pick our panelist brains even further. I just want to say thanks again to General Assembly and SG Innovate for hosting us, and thanks to all of you, like a packed room at this time in the morning. I guess it's not that early, but thank you again. And please, a big thanks to our panel, so Ben, Michael, Maida, and Chuckling. Thank you so much. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you, and have a great day.
Very good. Somebody else got the space. Space